In my previous video I made a start on building the Watts link for my Hudson build from scratch. We made the bell crank and the bracket that holds it onto the back axle. Now let's finish this Watts link build and then we can test it to see if it works. I can't wait. Coming up. So next up for me is to now start thinking about my link bars. Now I have to extend this frame downwards to provide a fastening point. Same here. But I'm not going to worry about that right now. But what I got to do is to figure out the length of these link bars. And I think for that we need to go to the forest engineering design office so we can make some drawings. Those of you who visit my shop often will know that I really like to use pieces of wood to design and mock up the stuff I fabricate. So we will be employing my world famous pad system once again to figure things out. For those of you who don't know, PAD is the abbreviation for Plywood Assisted Design. Kind of similar to CAD, but it does offer a lot more old school interaction. So what the hell is going on here? Let me try to explain. I made a full-size drawing on this dirty piece of plywood, looking at the truck directly from behind. So that there represents my 2x3 frame rail. Same that side. The distance across from here to here is what I measured off the truck. And then I've got a vertical center line at the halfway position. So I've just extended my frame rails down. I still have to build this, but I'm going to need it to create attachment points for my link bars. And then here, this with a little bit of imagination is my differential, and it's currently sitting in a slammed position. So again, I measured off of the truck. My airbags will be sitting something like that when they're compressed. So that's where the back axle will sit when we are fully slammed. And then I drew another center line down here, 8 inches down from the slam position. That's going to be my ride height. So obviously when we fully air up, my back axle will sit somewhere, or not somewhere, exactly here, like that. So this stick is going to represent my bell crank, and I'm going to let it attach right there with a nail, and I drilled a hole on the center line of the axle and also on the vertical center line. So down the line it's going to be able to rotate like that. I made the distance between those two center points exactly the same as the bell crank that I already made. In my case, this distance between there and there is 205 millimeters, which is as near as, damn it, 8 inches. It's not a critical dimension. I would imagine it can be anywhere between 150 to 300 millimeters, 6 to 12 inches. Like I said before, I made the total overall length of my bell crank a little bit less than the vertical height of my differential. So we need to add our link bar, and it's important then for the link bar to be parallel to the center line of the axle at ride height, which would also then mean that it's parallel to ground level. So what I did next then is I established the half distance of my bell crank, and then I could measure it here and draw this line, which now represents that horizontal line parallel to the center line of my axle. And then I established a line here, a vertical line, at the position that I can just have some clearance for my arm joint. In my case, this distance is 30 millimeters, which is about 1.25 inches. So then using this distance from the center line to that point, I made myself a compass with a stick. So you can see I'm using that distance, and since this point is now fixed, it will make sense to me that as the back axle goes up and down, this bar will scribe an arc like I've done there. So this is what I've got at the moment, but with my bottom link bar the same length as this stick here, my bell crank is sitting vertically, and I don't want that. I want it to have more of an angle, something like that, because an angled bell crank will give me extra movement, and I feel it's important for our air ride where we have lots of suspension travel. So I want to try and establish a way in which to determine what the actual length of my link bar should be, which will obviously then also determine the angle at which my bell crank sits. Now this is where I did a lot of head scratching, and I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to give it my best shot, and then we see where we end up. If you are a clever mathematician, I'm sure you're going to be nailing my ass, but it's a long way to my workshop out here in the forest. Okay, so first I drew this line, which is the top of my total suspension movement. In other words, this is my ride height. I'm seeing my total suspension movement as 10 inches. So from the ride height line to this line will then be 5 inches. So with my link bar at that length, that puts my bell crank completely vertically. I scribe this arc like so. Now I do know that I want my link bar longer, and I'm kind of figuring that the distance from here to here will be the total amount that it pushes when we get to the top end of that typical suspension movement. And now I'm figuring that since I've got 2 bars, I should halve this distance. So that's what I did here, and then I drew this line. So I'm now saying that my link bar length, my effective link bar length will be from that point down to this point where it attaches to my frame. So I made another wooden stick which is exactly that length. And then I noticed something else. My bell crank also moves through an arc. You can see it drawn there. And now you can see where that arc intersects that line, that little position right there. The distance from here to my center line is a little bit less than the one I worked with originally. It's not much, but yeah, what is that, about 1/4 inch. So I'm going to measure this distance where that arc intersects my vertical line and down to the center line of my axle. So here where my link bar attaches to the frame, I'm going to transfer that distance along this line. So my new attachment point will be right there, a little bit closer to the center line of the axle. And the same here with the link bar attachment on the other side, the upper link bar, also establishing a new center point right there. Okay, so I've now made myself 2 sticks with center to center distances that we established. That point there measured down to the original point on the tab. I have now changed their locations where they connect to the tabs to that new position that we discovered. Here's my other link bar. So let's assemble this business. I'm going to now stick on my bell crank, and then we can eat the pudding here and see if it works and what we get. Can just get this one lined up. Come on, there we go. Now we just need to move this so that it lines up with the center line of my axle at right height. That's looking pretty good. My bars are sitting parallel to the center line here at right height. Let's move this up to the fully slammed position and see what happens, which would be there. I mean, that's looking okay for me. It can't go up more, but yeah, that would be the point where the thing collapses. But there's no way we can reach that point, so that's okay. Back down to the right height level, and now we've just got typical suspension movement. Looks good to me. If we were to have a different ride height, say maybe somewhere there, that's what it will look like. But I don't see any problems with doing that. So yes, I don't know. There might be flaws in my geometry and in my trigonometry and in my maths. But I must have done something right, because this looks good to me. I'm going to roll with it. So I'm going to make my link bars exactly this length from center to center. So I'm going to build my link bars using the exact same method I employed when I was building my 4-link suspension system. I'll stick a link here on the screen if you want to see more details on that. But basically what we've got is I've got a piece of Schedule 40 steam pipe with an OD of 33.5 millimeters. That's a little bit less than 1.25 inches. The wall thickness is about 3.5 millimeters. And now what I'm going to do is I've got a M16 high tensile bolt here. I weld it on a nut, and this can actually now slide in like that. I can weld it here, and then I'm also planning to drill some holes here and plug weld it there, and then my IM joint can screw onto that like so. And I've got a locking nut here. My IM joint can screw on, and I can lock it where I want it. So I've done these two ends. Now I need to establish my lengths, cut it to size, and then do my other ends. So I've made myself a quick jig here with a piece of old scrap angle bar. I want to ensure that my two bars are exactly the same length. So what I did was I used my stick that we developed in the design office, the length of it, and now I could mark and scribe and drill at the correct distance apart. I could insert these bolts and bolt them in place. Now I can put my link bar on like this, check that my length is correct, then weld it up. Do exactly the same with the other one, and then I know I will have two that's exactly the same. So I still need to cut this one to the correct length. So I can now plug weld it through these 4 holes here and weld here around all the way. But I'm kind of thinking now, just to be safe, I'm just going to tack it on for now. And when we've got the whole thing assembled and we make sure that everything is good, I'll weld it up fully. We're getting there. I've got my pieces assembled just to check things out. I'll cut these bolts shorter once everything is said and done, and I will put nylock nuts up here as well. But yeah, we're starting to make some good progress, I think. So next for me is to extend this frame rail downwards so I can create an attachment point for my link bar. So I made this paper template to figure out how to do my downward extension of the frame rail. I did a nice curve on this side, so we might as well continue that theme, make it look pretty. So then I use this to make this section that will now sit something like that. So I just cut it, bent it. I did a similar thing when I was building it there, so if you want to see how I did this, you're going to have to go look out on the video when I built the frame rail here. So now I have to cut here to allow for this overlapping section, and the same down there. Okay, sweet man, I've got them both welded up and sculpted for that pretty look. And yes, I did bevel all my joints properly, and I ensured good weld gaps so that I could get good penetration on all my welds. I forgot to mention that I positioned these downward pieces at the correct distance away from the axle when it's in ride height or at ride height, so that when my link bar welds on here, it will sit parallel to the rear axle. The camera is probably distorting it a little bit, but it is parallel, I promise you. So I guess next for me is to make up these little tabs that needs to weld on here for the attachment of my link bars. So I'm going back to my drawing to get the dimensions of my brackets. In my case, the distance from the edge of the frame to the center of the hole is 30 millimeters. And I'm going to use a piece of flat bar, 50 by 6, 2 inch by 1/4 inch, to make my brackets from. Let's measure this vertical distance from the top of the frame as well. In my case it's 520 millimeters. So I'm going to go mark that on the frame and we can see how things work out. And the same on this side. And this one comes to 327 millimeters. So 520 here on the left hand side and 327 here on the right hand side. So now I want to find a way in which to ensure that my back axle is square and centered to everything. So I'm going to try and get my filthy hands in the picture here. In a previous video I established that the back axle is parallel to the front axle, but what about sideways? So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross measure from a point here to there and the same from there to here. So I need to find a reference up there. Same that side on the wishbone. Make a mark here. Equal distances from the flange on the back axle. And then if those two cross measurements are the same, everything will be good. So I created a reference point here on top of the axle. Everything is relative to reference. First I drew a center line and then I measured out the distance from the flange. I'm using 250 millimeters, it's just a random figure. That's about 10 inches. And then I've done exactly the same on the other side. So I'm going to use two tape measures to make my life easier. But I'm first going to check them against each other because it's very rare that two tape measures are exactly the same, as I've discovered when I was building boats back in the day. So what I did was I hooked them, where's my finger? I hooked them together up there. Yeah, I don't have a camera operator, so I have to do everything myself. Now I'm going to hold them here and I'm going to see if I can move the camera down to the 3 meter mark here. There we go. And let me just pull them nice and tight. And I don't know if you can see, but there's a difference of 1 millimeter, 1.5 millimeters between the two, which is actually not bad. So I think I'm going to live with it. I have seen it much worse though. So if you want to use two tape measures, always just check them against each other first. Right, so I've got my tape measures clamped to the same spot on the wishbones up there. So let's measure here and see what we get. Okay, let's see. So here on the right hand side, I measure to my point of reference 318, call it 6, 3186. Let's go check out the other side. So here on the left hand side I get, let's see, 3188. 3188. And the right hand side is 3186. Holy cow, that's a difference of only 2 millimeters. Unbelievable. And if I want to split bolles, this tape measure was also the longer one. So I need to subtract that difference of about a millimeter, which would make this dimension 3187. Wow, can't get better than that. So I clamped on this bit of angle bar here, because according to my measurements that I got off that drawing, this is where the tabs for the link bar on this side have to sit. Same thing here on the left hand side. Those tabs will go right there. So the white noise hearing in the background is the rain on my tin roof. I tell you, we've been having so much rain lately. It's just unbelievable. Well, I'm not going to let the rain stop me. Let's stick my contraption on here so we can see how it works out. Just going to rest my link bar ends here on these temporary landings that I've made here. And then this bottom brace that you see here That's just temporary. I still have to conclude my frame construction in the back here. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do there yet. Well, it looks right. So I think my careful drawing and measurements are paying off. So let's see. Let's actually measure it to see that my link bars are parallel to my back axle. So I've checked that my diff is parallel to my frame. I've got it sitting at my design right height. So I'm 0 here. Let's see what we get here on the link bar. How about that? 0 as well. Awesome. Let me check the other side. Okay, here on the right hand side I've got 0 on my axle. Let's see what we get on the link bar. Holy cow, 0 as well. Lucky man, it's definitely a good day. And if I look at it down from above, I can see that my bars are parallel to my axle as well. Really no need to measure that. This is close enough. Those heim joints offer more than enough movement. So I'm happy with that. So let me get some good tacks on these tabs before this business decides to go somewhere. And then we can jack it up and down to see how it works. I can't wait. The moment of truth. Let's eat the pudding. So that would be the fully slammed position. I've got my compressed bag mock-up in there. Now we air up. And about there somewhere would be ride height, maybe a little bit higher. And there's a little bit of suspension moving downwards and upwards. So one more thing I have to do here, I can't leave this bolt like that. So I want to put a bracket across here so that the bolt goes into sort of a double shear scenario. So I reclaimed this piece from that original bracket that I messed up. So that goes like that, and then I've cut a little bit of cardboard for a piece that must sit there, both sides. I think I'll do well to add a bit of this flat bar in here like that. Might cut it at a bit of an angle down there, just to brace it up a bit more. But I'm going to go do that on the bench. I need to take all this apart anyway, so I can weld up my tabs fully. So yeah, let's do that. So I did the old sculpty thing with the grinders and a bit of the file here and there, just because I like it so much. Although maybe it's just a way to hide all my untidy welding. So I thought I was going to assemble this bloody thing for the last time. And now look how clever I am. This flange that I just added here is now fouling my link bar. There's no way it can reach my tab when I'm in the fully slammed position. I'm going to have to cut it out and change it and put it in the bottom. I don't know, man. I think I'm getting too old for this shit. Damn it. So I've just roughly cut it away to see the kind of clearance I need. Now let me just take this link bar off here and lift it away. So exactly that triangular flange that I added is causing the problem. Oh well, you know what, sometimes you got to do it twice to get it nice. So I'll have to cut this flange off nicely and then add it in the bottom, and then my problem will be solved. So I quickly fixed the problem while no one was looking, and I moved this flange down to the bottom. So what's the problem? In my defense, Your Honor, just remember this: the man who makes no mistakes usually does not make anything. So let's see if my change is going to work. I've got the back axle jacked up all the way into the slant position. So now let's just see. This needs to go in there. Fantastic, it's clearing now, I love it. Let's have a quick look here at something else that has to do with the geometry of a Watts link. And you might find it interesting, because I certainly do. So I've got the back axle just resting on the jack there, right below the center point. So look what happens if I move the axle diagonally. You will notice that it rolls around exactly that point. So yes, with my setup, I've got heim joints on my parallel forelinks, so I do get a lot more diagonal movement. It will certainly be less if you run bushes. So this shows that the roll center of your vehicle is determined by the vertical position of the pivot point of the bell crank. The Watts link will certainly work if this point sits higher vertically or lower vertically, but it will change the roll center of your car, or truck in my case. So the correct location of the roll center on a vehicle is an altogether different discussion. But it's my opinion that if you locate it on the horizontal center line of your back axle, it's a pretty good location. And there we have it. We've got ourselves a Watts link that has been designed and built from scratch. I think it's going to work really well, but if for some strange reason it doesn't, you'll be the first to know. So I've still got to build some more frame bits and pieces here, add some additional bracing, but we'll save that for another time. So I want to thank you for spending time with me out here in the shop and keeping me company. I enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, have a lucky one.